Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.
What was this room?
It was my grandma's bedroom.
Okay. There's some good vibes in here then.
Oh yeah, always. This is where Nickelodeon will be watched, and we'd be watching rap videos, and we weren't supposed to. Kid stuff. All right, Detroit is Different in full effect. I have another return guest, and a return guest that actually has been in studio with some of her clients. So when we think about media, when we think about public relations, we think of communications, we think marketing. It's a lot of wings and a lot of hats, and a lot of people are claiming to be in this space, but it's only a couple people that really know how things were delivered at one point in time when you had a lot of wings. So that means we're talking about written word. We're thinking about broadcast and television and radio. And then even as the internet started to surface and things like that, and managing this for some of what I would consider one of the biggest personalities I've ever met, and also one of the smoothest personalities I've ever met, and then just other people in other projects. And also, I'm going to add this to the mix. Coming with one of the funniest people in American history as well. Charlene Mitchell Rodgers, how are you today?
Kye Frasier, it's always a pleasure to be in your presence. And, we're in the Mutual Admiration Society because I think you are one of the smartest young men that I've met and been around. You're full of ideas and you're creative. You don't let other people get in your way of your progress, and I love that.
Thank you. It's like you got to stay going. It makes sense in my mind, but you know what they always say, you got to be a little crazy to be in business anyway. So it's like, even if it makes no sense to anybody else, it's kind of making more sense to me. And as it makes sense to me, I get others to understand and grow and connect and things like that. And you've worked with some people, big personalities like that. And I want to kind of open from there because you've been on the show before, so we don't have to do this traditional story. Let's go right into that. One of the biggest personalities that you worked with was Mel Farr for years. And Mel Farr's personality, I don't know if people remember Mel Farr, but if you don't, so first off, let's say successful football player, but that's almost like that may be like the smallest part of Mel Farr's career. The biggest part of Mel Farr's career was you may know him as a person with a car dealership that sold cars and things like that, but he also had a whole lot about financing, but more so just big personality and not ashamed to impose his will as a black man in spaces where black men usually would never speak up, and helping him with molding and probably getting him off the ledge from doing some crazy stuff. Like I said, that propensity to crazy was there, would be you. And I had the opportunity to kind of just fill him out towards his, before his passing, as he took to a group, the African Caribbean Chamber of Commerce and Aero Service at the time. And usually for maybe about 4 meetings straight, for hours, he just had time on his hand. He'd be traveling from Chicago. We'd just be debating almost any and everything. You know what I'm saying? Because anybody that knew me back then when I'm in my 20s, I'd debate you about anything. Sort of now. Not as much now, but definitely then. But Mel was quick on his feet. Very big ideas, very grandiose, very creative, very much so it's a way to make this happen. And we're going to figure out how we make this happen. What's it like working with someone that creative in this world of business?
Wow, that's a lot that you said, and I think you understood him very well when you said the word grandiose, because he would come up with these ideas in a meeting and everybody would look at him and it would get quiet and we'd say, "What?" And he'd say, "I can do this. I'm the only person who can do this." That was what he would always say.
Yes.
He said, "Nobody else can do this except
Yes.
me." And I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, what kind of chore do I have ahead of me? But he motivated other people to think big.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought very big. People thought that he could not open his own finance company, Triple M Financing, which he named after his 3 kids, Mel Jr., Michael, and Monet. Triple M Financing. And he put it right there on the same premises as his 8 Mile used car dealership, which eventually became also a new car dealership for Kia and Hyundai. And no black car dealer had ever done what he did. Most white car dealers never did what he did. And everyone thought, or at least most people thought, he would fail. They always said, Mel, why do you want so much? Why do you have to have so much? Why can't you just be happy with such and such? And his answer would always be, why don't you ask white guys, why can't they be happy with one thing or two things? You know, you applaud white people when they get richer and richer and get bigger and bigger, but you try to scare the black man from going further. So, yeah, he had a vision. And when he hired me, I was on television, actually. And I thought, are you crazy? I'm not going to leave television news to come and work at a car dealership. But when he explained what he wanted to do, it kind of makes sense. And I took that leap of faith. And he only had one dealership at the time, at the corner of Greenfield and 10 Mile in Oak Park. And we expanded to 15 dealerships in 6 states. And I did the marketing for all of them. So it was a good decision in the end.
All right. And as I said, very grandiose, as you can see, like stories like that. And I get it more so from my grandfather, Don Scott, rest in peace. And my dad, like I hear some of these stories from my granddad and it's like, yeah. And that's where, like, I know I could happen. So when I met him and he was telling those same stories, like, seriously, Mel Farr would meet you and say, oh, yeah, you're going to end up working for me. And let me tell you why. And then he pull out a napkin and be like, all right.
Oh,
so
yeah, he pulled out the napkin. Yes.
This is going to happen here and this is going to happen there. And really, like, down home Southern sensibilities and not intimidated by people in the room with, as he say, like, you know, them, just like my granddad would be. You know, some of them, you know what I'm saying, them black folk that go to Harvard and get all them degrees and stuff like that, you know, they don't really know how money gonna work because money gonna work like tap, tap, tap. And you thinking to yourself like, all right, you got, I got Mel Farr right here in my face. And then I have all these other people that basically he's talking about. He's talking about people that have went to school, academically, like, you know, check the boxes, probably know how to do a feasibility study and can do SWOT analyses about which decisions to make at what time and how and move forward with that. But they've never done what Mel's talking about doing.
Well, you know, he did graduate from UCLA, so
I know,
and he picked up a little something there.
He picked up a lot there, but I'm saying, but it was more so the street knowledge from him, and the street knowledge of the
Beaumont,
real
Texas, in a racist environment, and not being able to get a scholarship to a school in the south
in the SEC, basically, yeah,
go to the other coast to get a scholarship, you know, to college.
I mean, he would say like, yeah, the college information, it's like college teach you good information, but they don't teach you business, and then business with black folks especially, and that's where like more so the discussions would kind of unfold because it's like you can't do a lot of this stuff on paper. You have to do this stuff in real life, and stuff in real life goes directly with communicating. So your experience with communicating also puts you with another one of those large figures, Dick Gregory. I'm watching this documentary.
He was absolutely the biggest figure that I've ever worked with, and the most brilliant man. And you talk about funny, because I mean he did start out as a comic, and he could be talking about something so serious, and he would just interject humor to lighten it up, and he would do it without even thinking. He was one funny guy.
And when we talk about funny guy, but grandiose, like the project, I'm watching this documentary, and it follows you when Dick Gregory was running across America. And so my whole thought process of this, and I'm sure he probably had some words to say about this, was, okay, the only thing I knew like that was the Forrest Gump story. But now I'm like, okay, so one second, did the Forrest Gump movie take Dick Gregory's story?
That's a funny analogy.
You know what I'm saying? But can you explain
we did 50
what
miles
that's
a
like?
day. We started out in L.A. Well, first of all, you got to backtrack just a little bit. I won't take too much time, but I met Dick Gregory in Washington, D.C. When I was a TV news reporter. And because I was one of the neophytes on the staff, one of the youngest people, I had to work holidays and weekends. So I was working on Thanksgiving Day. Little did I know that every year on Thanksgiving Day, Dick Gregory would do a protest in front of the White House before they had all the gates and stuff up. And he would always purposely do it without a permit so that he would be arrested. It was all planned. And he had 2 of his boys there. I think it was, I don't know if it was Johanse and Greg. He had a whole bunch of kids. But anyway, his 10 children. He had 2 of his sons with him. And, of course, the guy that worked for him, Big Mike. And Big Mike was in charge of the kids and what have you. So, my cameraman, showed him being arrested, handcuffed, put in the paddy wagon. And then I went over and talked to his sons and, pretty much asked, how does it feel to see your dad being arrested, yada, yada, yada. Don't remember what they answered. Don't remember really what my exact question was. But later on, back in the newsroom, editing the piece, and because we didn't really have DVR and all that kind of stuff back then, if you were a news reporter, you generally hung around past your off time so that you could watch your piece from the newsroom. Because if you had to drive home, you'd miss the news. So, we just watched the news and they said, Charlene, you got a phone call. It's Dick Gregory. Yeah, punk me. Okay, we know it's not Dick Gregory. He's locked up. But I took the phone call and it was. I'm like, how are you out? He goes, no, I'm sitting here at the jailhouse with the guys. We're watching the TV. I said, you got a phone? He said, I got a phone, TV, and I got a plate of food over here. Plate of ribs. Well, he doesn't even eat ribs.
Yeah, I was
okay.
gonna say, yeah.
But
yeah.
that was the funny part. He said, I just saw the interview you did with my kids. He said, very good. You want to have dinner tomorrow night? And so I said, well, let me ask my significant other,
Yeah, and then also, are you going to be
yeah.
out of jail, sir?
Yeah. Well, he said he was on his way out that day. It was just for show. Once the cameras were
Yeah.
gone, he's released. So the next day we had dinner or lunch or someplace in D.C., and he said, you need to come work for me. Okay, here's this come work for me. I'm like,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
TV.
yeah.
This is what I do. He says, you don't have to give up TV. He said, you come work for me. I'm getting ready to do a bicentennial cross-country run for hunger. To draw attention to hunger in America. And it's going to last for, a couple of months. I forget how many days it was. And we start in L.A., we go to New York. I said, but then what? I'm quitting my job. They're not going to let me come back. He says, you're going to get another job in Boston. I said, I don't know anybody in Boston. He said, I do. And I'm putting you with my agent at MCM, which is ICM, International Creative Management out of New York. Next thing I know, I'm meeting with these people. I got an agent. They get me a job that starts after the run. They hire me. I get a contract. I know how much money I'm going to make, and I can still do the run.
All right.
It was amazing.
So yes, and that's like pre-run. But let's really he really did run across the country.
Yes, we had a van, and we had a couple of cars, and there was a staff of maybe 8 people. There were 2 marathon runners who were with him, who were that's all they did was run. A white guy and a black guy. And they ran 50 miles a day, but we would be ahead. We would go ahead of the group to go, because we didn't have internet. And I'm doing PR, and I would go to these little towns, and we had the wire. We would have to go use the wire services. Dick Gregory will be here tomorrow morning at such and such a time. We'd have the mayor there. And so he was on the front page of every small town newspaper, Albuquerque, all these places that people don't normally think about.
So you, and then how far removed from college were you? How, what was your skill? Because you were more in broadcast, not necessarily.
Yeah, well, when I worked for him, I was deep into my career. It was when I worked in D.C., that was my 3rd television job.
Okay.
I started in Toledo, my hometown, after I got my master's degree in radio, TV, film. Then I worked in Baltimore. Then I went to D.C. And then he kind of pulled me away from D.C. to do the run. Then I worked in Boston.
So let's talk a little bit about what that experience of like just being able to adapt. How did you take the adapting from saying, okay, I'm a broadcaster, and at the time, like seeing that trajectory and then shifting and being open to what becomes what you do now? A lot of publicity, a lot of communications, a lot of public relations, which they're interrelated. And let me say this to people, and you're going to get a little bit more in this interview. They're interrelated, but that doesn't mean that they're connected. Just because.
Well, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of very good PR people who think that they can do television.
And vice versa,
and
too.
they are not good at it.
And vice versa
people
as well.
in TV
Yeah.
who leave TV, and it seems like a natural progression to move into public relations, and a lot of us have done that. Some of it have not been so
as
good.
Successful. Yeah.
I have been, I think, fairly successful.
Yeah.
I have been fairly successful because I took, when I was in TV, you walk in the morning and they hand you something. Charlene, you're going to do this, this, and this today, and you read a press release. You see all kind of typos in it and stuff that didn't make sense. I'm like, I can do better than this. Who wrote this? And you'd go to do the story. And, because I did have skills from school, learning to write press releases. And I've always been a person that, even when I was a little kid, I'd stand in the mirror and pretend I was a news broadcaster with a hairbrush in my hand, looking in the mirror and signing off and saying my name.
Okay.
Because, that kind of thing. So for me, it was an easy segue. It really was.
So, but because that easiness of it, also when you come in with, when you're working as a broadcaster because you're connected to the television brand and that station, that's different than basically being in a van 50 miles ahead and God knows where West Virginia saying, hey, Dick Gregory going to come here tomorrow. So, hey, we would like to meet your mayor. We'd like your newspaper to come out. Like, that takes a lot of confidence and a lot of...
And sometimes the haters would come out.
I'm sure
Not
they probably...
too many, but in certain states
Yeah.
where maybe his philosophy did not coincide with theirs, a couple people would maybe come out and scream at us. We didn't get called the N-word or anything like that, but you could tell that some people would come out like, why are you guys here? How long are you going to be here? Get out of town. And we were getting out of town. We made quick stops, but sometimes, obviously we had to stay in, hotels and everything. And one time I was driving the van. I didn't usually drive the van. And you know how you have these hotels or motels that have the thing that says, gives you the number of feet that you and it says, 10 feet or 8 feet or something like that. And so I didn't pay attention to it, and I drove under it and just beat the top of the van, because it was like a high top van, and broke something. And
I'm sure he got a laugh out of that.
Oh, he thought it was funny as heck.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
and he
just
went
knowing
and
the
told people,
comedian.
he said, my PR person just messed up the thing. How much does it cost?
Yeah.
They're like, you're Dick Gregory. You're Dick Gregory. Ah, sure. People hit it all the time. That was the end of that. Because it didn't really ruin it, but it was like, I thought, oh God, I'm gonna be in so much trouble. He's gonna have to pay for this. I'm gonna get fired. It turned into a joke.
I'm sure it did. So from that, and that's such a dynamic experience of meeting, as people say, like, what's America like? What's America like? Until I was a truck driver at one point in time. So I've been in some of these small towns. Yeah. I drove 18. So with it, it took me in opening the lens, because to fund my hip hop career at one point in time, the best way I thought I could do was truck driving.
Make good money.
It was
truck
interesting.
driving.
You can also lose money, but like everything, it's opportunity there, not opportunity there. But seeing a lot of America, what was it like for you just to see a lot of it? Because it's a perception from being in around larger cities, especially Black communities, that we think of what America really is like, the pulse. But then when you get there, it's like, this is a lot different than what I was thinking.
Well, we went through a lot of states, obviously, and the geography for me was just beautiful, because America has so many different looks to it. Some parts are flat, some parts are hilly, some parts are mountainous, some places are cold, some places are real hot. And I think that's that's what got me into loving to travel and being able to see America without having a travel agent. Just seeing it as it really was, seeing the people, the food, the stops. The best part of that run was when we teamed up with Muhammad Ali.
Explain that.
He invited, because he was, at the time, you probably know, he was making this formula that was supposed to give you energy, help burn fat, all this kind of thing. And he had Muhammad Ali on a couple of his formulas. And I know he was really using it because I saw him eat the stuff. Okay. And he invited him to come out and join us. And we were like in the desert somewhere. And he brought his then pregnant paramour, who is, who he eventually married and is the mother of the young lady that boxes. Layla's mother. So Layla's mother was with him, and they had a beautiful big trailer, what do you call the ones that drive, not a trailer, but like a bus.
Okay, so he had like the luxury vehicle. He had the Ali.
Yes, he had the Ali brand. Yes, that model, the Ali model. And I never went in it. Nobody ever invited me to go inside. But he parked right there, and we would stay up all night. He's doing card tricks and telling jokes. To be in the presence of Muhammad Ali and Dick Gregory in the middle of nowhere under a dark sky full of stars. Yeah. That's how far in the wilderness we were, where I can't remember where we were. It was just fascinating.
And this is all like months.
Most of us on the team were fasting at the time. So when you're fasting and just drinking water, your mind is like, you're really absorbing things because you're at a different level when you're not eating and digesting and your body is at peace.
But and then I also want to juxtapose it to the reality of this was months away from you being in D.C. like this is such a different type of career path. And then this is also something for everybody to recognize that sometimes take that opportunity. You don't know what's going to happen. If you run at that full pace all the time, you were running at the full pace on a Thanksgiving Day broadcast when nobody else probably even wanted that because they probably would rather not be working on Thanksgiving. And you took that opportunity and it became and blossomed into a hell of a life-changing experience that armed you, I'm assuming, definitely for saying, okay, if I could do this across the country, these 15 dealerships across a couple states, I can talk to these people.
Well, there was a lot of time in between.
I know between them, but I know.
But I learned a lot. When you surround yourself, either by accident or purposely, you surround yourself with smart people and people who are deep thinkers, like a Dick Gregory. Hopefully you take some of that with you, and it's a confidence builder. Even though I've always been a pretty confident person, there's always in the back of my mind, I wonder if I'm going to be good at that. I wonder if I can, do this or that. But that was a real confidence builder for me because he was such a positive person. It's like he chose me to do this. He chose me. I never did this before.
Yeah.
I never did PR.
Yeah.
He was my first PR client.
Yeah.
So when I came out of that, I said, shoot, I can do PR for anybody.
Yep. So from there, Boston, and you happen to end up and land in Boston, right?
Because he got me. He arranged that job. I didn't even know these people.
Yeah, but you also land there right at the time of the bus boycott situation.
Ooh, busing was at its peak.
I don't know if people have an understanding for what was happening at the time. So, okay, you have Brown versus Board of Education for people, and we know Thurgood Marshall and the landmark case of what's funny, that kind of goes to my family down in, especially like when we think of Little Rock, Arkansas, what breaks the barrier for a lot of what becomes a Civil Rights Act. Just because that happened in the late 60s does not mean that by the 80s, people were in line with what that looked like. Explain what it was like to be in Boston, of all cities.
Well, I had never been that far east. I'd never been, to the New England states before. All I was thinking about is this great contract I just got. I mean, this is late 70s. This is 70s, 1976. And I walked in there, and I forget what I was making in D.C., and you got to remember, the numbers I'm going to throw out now
but we got to compare it for inflation, inflation.
But back then, I was in my 20s, and I got like a $65,000 a year contract. That was a whole bunch of money.
Yeah.
I was a single woman. Stuff didn't cost that much. You could buy a new car for $20,000. So, I mean, that was a lot of money, and I wouldn't have gotten that without Dick Gregory and the agent, even though I had to pay them 10%. It was fine, So you talk about, going to Boston, and I'm thinking, oh, Boston, the Tea Party, the this, the that, and I got there, and man, being on TV, you get treated differently. People start to recognize you, and the people that may have called you the N-word will say, hi, I watched you on TV last night. So I didn't really feel what a lot of people felt, okay, including my then husband. When we would, he'd come home with stories, and I'd say, God, nobody treats me like that, But Boston was different. Busing was at its height. There was a school board president who was just a stone cold racist and was proud of it. And they sent me to, it was a day that the heat was unbearable. It was like 100 degrees. I'm not kidding, 100 degrees. And there's an area called South Boston, an area called Roxbury. South Boston is white, mostly Irish, few Italians. Roxbury, predominantly black.
All right, let me give some media context for people.
Then you got the beach.
Okay, I want to give some media context for people. So, New Edition, which we love if you're in my age range, that's Roxbury. Bobby Brown and all of them. Ronnie, Bobby, Ricky, Mike. Not Johnny Gill. He's from D.C., actually. But he was added to the group after, whatever.
Yes.
So that's Roxbury, Boston. Strong Boston community. Malcolm X's auntie, if you read the autobiography, and so many other things. You think about a lot of organizing with the Nation of Islam. You think of a lot of black Boston, even the connection to a lot of the churches. Like when people say, well, Martin Luther King was, and it's like, yeah, because it was a strong black faith-based organizing community that always has been there in Boston. Then you got Southie. So if people have ever seen The
That's
Town,
what they call it too, Southie.
yeah, like that show, The Town, the movie with Ben Affleck and Jeremy Renner. So that's that Southie side of a lot of Irish people, a lot of what I guess would be labeled as like working class, blue collar, like poorer American white sensibilities. Yeah, a lot of me as a Piston fan. When I think of Boston, I'm thinking of the Southie side, and then these communities are not far, and you're in the mix of that. So I just wanted to give some
100
media
degrees
context.
outside.
Yeah,
You got some projects over here, some projects over here.
Yep.
Southie, Roxbury. But the beach is, one long stretch of sand and water. And like I said, it was very hot out. So everybody's outside because the projects don't have any air conditioning.
yeah,
And you had so they send me over there because there's some kind of activity going on. Be careful, but they sent me
Yeah.
with my cameraman. And I saw something I'd never seen in my whole life. There were adult women, white women, in little house dresses and crap and shorts and picking up sand and picking up rocks and seashells and throwing this stuff at little black children and saying, get out of here. Get out of here. This is our beach. We don't want you here. Well, I don't think the beach belonged to anybody special. Everybody was trying to dip in the water and get cooled off. And, my very smart reporting, self, I go down there with my wireless mic because the cameraman's over here someplace, but I got the wireless mic. I'm going, why are you doing this? Can't everybody, like the famous words of Rodney King, can't we just all get along? And the lady said, you must be new here. I said, well, yes, I just came here from Washington, D.C. She said, well, this ain't Washington, this ain't Chocolate City.
yeah,
And we don't want them out here, these, Negroes.
yeah.
I'm like, but you're throwing rocks at little children. She told me she'll throw a rock at you.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Now, I still don't have the good sense to say, stop this interview. It's not going well. I'm going to try to make sense of somebody who, makes sense of nonsense. So I turn around to ask my cameraman to do something. He's way over here, shooting with the long lens. Okay. Because he's been there before. He knows what's getting ready to happen. And that's when I knew I need to end this. And I walked away and I did my little stand-up. I came back. I guess the cameraman went in and told the news director or somebody, you can't really send her because she doesn't understand what's going on here. So the next day, it had elevated. And I thought I would be covering the story because usually when you get put on a story, you continue and you cover.
Yeah.
They sent somebody else. And I had a fit. I wanted to go back. They said, we are not sending you back there because we don't want anything to happen to you. And they sent a white reporter.
Yeah, and Boston's a reflection of a lot of things in America because it's one of those anchoring 13 provinces that starts America. So a lot of the old money, like when people talk about old money, they're talking about like that area because this is quote unquote what was settled, or I mean that's
Talking
what
about
they
Paul
use.
Revere.
Stolen. This is where the most money from the British Crown was poured into to quote unquote start America before it was even America. So the families, yeah. I mean the families, the layouts, a lot of things in that Massachusetts and in Boston area, like those roots go back very deep.
But we talked about, the reaction of the white people in that situation I just described. But the black community in Boston, when you were new and a person like me, on television, a visible person, you were embraced immediately. I was invited. There was a black woman who owned a funeral home, and she knew everybody. And the small, I think there was like 1.5% black population within the city limits. But these were highly educated people. So it was very different than a city that's predominantly black where, maybe you have fewer educated people. But I'm talking about the doctors, the lawyers, the business people, the business owners really stuck together. There was a tight-knit black community in Boston that I really appreciated it because they embraced me. They had a little booklet, like places to go, things to do culturally, and they introduced you to everybody. And I love that. And this woman would have, every other month, she'd have a party. She'd just invite everybody, to her lawn, and you met people. And I like that. I don't see that even here in Detroit.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. What leads you back around this way? So after Boston.
I'm gonna edit it and make it very, 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 very short.
Okay.
I was in Boston. My television career in Boston was extremely successful. I met people, one of which is still one of my very, very best friends in the world, Lynn Vaughn. She, we worked together as reporters. She was a radio reporter. I met her at a party. She says, I keep sending tapes to your station. They don't answer me. I said, give me your tape. I'll take it into the news director. He hired her right away. He said he just had never seen her tape. We are still best friends after, since before my son was born, so over 40 years. Then she left Boston to go work for CNN, where she was a international headline news reporter for like 13 years, I think.
Yeah.
And we still talk, once a week, like we were never apart, even though she's in Atlanta and I was in her wedding. She didn't get married till she was 50. And she and her husband just celebrated 21 years.
Oh, see, that may be a lesson.
Last week.
Okay.
Yeah, last week. So there's hope for everybody.
Uh-huh.
So, I met good people there that I still communicate with. And, so you meet people along the way, different points of your life. And Detroit, I got here back in Michigan because I wanted to be closer to family.
That makes sense.
And to be very transparent, I was trying to save a marriage.
That makes sense.
And I thought getting closer to family
Will help anchor.
is going to help because I'll have my family around me who can kind of help with the kinks that were going on. Did not work.
What was it like coming back to Detroit at that time? Because I'm sure, when you visit, it's different than like,
I had never lived in Detroit.
okay, well then
I was
let's
from
talk.
Toledo.
Okay.
So I visited Detroit a lot in my youth.
Yeah, that's
because
what
we had relatives in Detroit. My father had plenty of relatives in Detroit, and we would always come up at holidays because we shopped at Hudson's and all of that. And Toledo's not that far.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
it's like
and
a
it's
suburb
way
of Detroit.
it's way more to do here.
It's
than
way
in
more
Toledo.
to do. And my parents, they always talked about Detroit because this is where they came to party at the 20 grand and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, came back to this area and started work and I liked it. It felt like home. I've lived in Michigan longer than I've ever lived any place in my life, including the city where I grew up. So it's home for me. It's really home. You get very comfortable. I've met great people here. Had a good career here at Channel 2 and at Channel 7. And then when I started my PR firm, I started meeting other people, other cultures, and everything just blossomed. And I thought about like, okay, will I stay here forever? Will I move someplace else? I don't know. I don't think I want to start all over again someplace else. I like traveling, but this is kind of home. You learn your way around as much as I can't find my way around sometimes without GPS, but you learn, the spots where you want to go and you get comfy with folks that you've made friends with.
So the pulse, though, switching from broadcast to like, okay, I'm about to run this PR firm all the time. When did you hit that switch where it's like, this is what I'm going to do?
Well, I set up a little office in my little condo where I was living, my rented condo, and started practicing writing press releases and this, that, and the other. And then just started getting a couple small clients. And then, Mel Farr became a client. But I was doing mainly fashion PR. And I had a bunch of clients in downtown Birmingham. I say, well, why would you go down there? Because I met somebody, and because I was on TV, she was asking how to do this, how to do that. She owned a little jewelry store. And I said, well, I can probably do that. She says, well, I had a PR person. She was terrible, blah, blah, blah. And I was paying her all this money. And so I started, and I didn't charge very much. I undercharged. But in doing so, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clients all on downtown Birmingham who all had the same PR person. They all fired that person.
Wow.
And they all hired me.
Wow.
Okay. And they were probably saying behind my back, dang, she don't charge enough. She must be stupid. No, I wasn't stupid. I was smart. Because that other person lost a lot and I gained a lot. Because at that time, the Free Press and the News were doing a double truck, what they call it, the double page fashion. It was all local. And they featured local shops. So I had a children's shoe store, children's clothing store, I had a this, a that, or the other. And I hope he's not embarrassed, but my son was the house model for the Detroit News at the time. So he was in the paper almost every Sunday.
There you go.
And we got free clothes, like really nice clothes.
That's what's
You
up.
know, from the nice, little shirts that would be like $50, they said, well, keep it. That's how I, got paid. So, I had a lot of fun doing that. It was just fun.
So so in this process, you start the firm with the idea of, okay, I'm going to get into this. When did it become like, okay, one second, this is really what I do? Like, when did it become more of like okay, you're looking at the clients more than you're looking at the next, hey, I could be a broadcaster in Sacramento or San Diego or something. Like, when did you hit the switch to say?
Well, I was walking a fine line. I was at Channel 7, and I switched to working just weekends at Channel 7, Saturday and Sunday. And I was teaching school at Southfield High School, running the radio station, teaching broadcasting to high school students and running the student-run radio station, WSHJ 88.3. And so I had, 2 real jobs, and I was starting my firm. So actually, I think I was kind of burned out at that time because I found myself, just covering fires and murders, tragedy, just tragedy. And when you're a new reporter and you're very young, you want the hard news story. Send me to the fire. Send me to that triple homicide. I want to cover that. But as you have covered hundreds of those, you're like, send me to the circus. Send me someplace where I can laugh and smile, show I have teeth, because you just kind of get burned out. And I think the straw that broke the camel's back, and again, I got to talk about my son. I'm a single mother at that time, divorced. My mom had moved up from Toledo, and she was, she moved here, left her nursing job and everything to help.
And assist with the family.
Yes, do that kind of thing. But I was working on a Sunday, and we were having a birthday party for my son. So normally a kid's birthday party, you have 2 in the afternoon, 2 to 5, something like that. I said, let's start it a little bit later because I've got to work, but I'm going to ask to get off early. And they said, yes, you can get off early today. You can leave at 4 o'clock or whatever. But they sent me to a story. It was a barricaded gunman. And it was a wait. The cops were there, and they're on all the military stuff and the tanks, and they're spraying this tear gas. I'm getting it all. And I'm like, man, either shoot yourself or come out, do something. I got a party going on at my house. It's getting ready to start. So I finally get home, smelling like tear gas, and I have my guests who all have their little kids like, where you been? How could you work on your... I'm like, you know something? I hope everybody had a nice time. People were almost ready to leave, but then a few of them stayed over a little bit because I was there. But I said, this is going to happen again and again and again. And one day there was a teacher strike or something, and I had to go out to Pontiac, to the Pontiac school board headquarters or something. Odell Nails was the superintendent at the time, and we were going to go interview him, and they had been doing a live shot. My babysitter didn't show up. Again, it's a weekend. So who did I tag along? Come on, we got to go. You got to go to work. It was either don't go to work. They go, you got to come. We got nobody else. We only have 2 reporters on the week. You got to come. I said, I have to bring my child. And so I'm doing my live shot, and he's behaving. But as soon as I start talking on camera, he says, Mommy. The cameraman muzzled him, put his hand over his mouth, and he's like stomping his feet. Yeah. I'm like, again,
this ain't gonna work.
It's another signal. I can't, they'll let me do this once or twice, but I can't do this every week.
Yeah.
I've got to, but slowly but surely, I wanted to make sure before I let go of those paychecks.
That everything, that the ducks were in the water.
I wasn't, some people just say, I'm leaving my job and I'm going to go do something, and if I make it, good. If I don't make it, I'll just keep trying. No, I need the paycheck.
So, so now let's talk a little bit more about that art of, like I say, it's many wings into this world of communication. So, and it all falls under marketing for me. So I don't know if everybody knows, I have a master's degree in marketing from Walsh, which is cool, but it's still like I feel kind of like a lot like Mel Farr. My business experience is really my business experience. Though school did teach me a lot of the parameters of where things work. And people mix and match a lot of this stuff all the time. So publicity is different than public relations, it's different than just communications, it's different than marketing, it's different than advertising is so let me break down some of the marketing tree for everybody, and then let's talk a little bit more about this, but I want to at least give this so that we can educate people a little bit that get confused nowadays. And not to mention, especially in the social media world where people is like, oh, you give me $100 and then I get you 10,000 followers. And then, whatever you selling, you can sell your widget and you can take your widget and it'll make $20,000. It's like, all right, it sounds too good to be true. It probably is. So first, let's break things down in the marketing house. Publicity. Publicity is basically you getting, quote unquote, free, for a lack of a better term, advertisement for something that you're doing, and it has to be angled in the right way. So if you have a client and you need a publicity strategy within your communication strategy, you need to figure out, okay, what are you doing this year that possibly would align around something? So like Halloween is coming up, so it's going to be a lot of trunk or treats and things like that. That can be considered some publicity if you already have something like that into your programming. Public relations. Public relations is when you take that publicity up a level and you actually like say, okay, just instead of trunk or treat, because kids are eating too many candies and stuff like that and getting bad teeth, we're going to bring a dentist out and we're going to give away something very healthy, some healthy choices of snacks. So now you're paying more money. The public relations is you're relating with the public with whatever you're giving to them. Okay, now, the other wing of this comes back into, let's just say, if you're paying for it, promotions. So promotional items would be you come in the store, the minute you walk in the store, you're going to get some free candy because Halloween's happening. Bam, you get some candy in your hand. I'm happy. That right there would be promotional. And you still need to get the word out for that. And this is where it gets confusing because it's like, don't you got to publicize your promotion? That can sound confusing to you, but it can kind of be like that. And then we get into the other form of advertising, meaning that an advertisement effectively can do a couple of different things, because sometimes if you're advertising to sell, sometimes you're advertising to express a message. Sometimes you're advertising just to raise awareness around what you're doing. And then here go the other thing that's come into mind of like, I don't know, maybe around like 2010, and everybody kept talking about it, and the whole concept of branding. And I got to have my own brand, and I got to be a good brand person, and I'm a good brand ambassador. So branding is actually having, it's heightening the awareness of whatever you are, your business is, whatever your product is, to the point where basically it speaks before it happens. So hence, if somebody says, if somebody says something like, let's see, but Monday Night Football is a part of the NFL. It's a part of these teams playing, but it's a brand within itself, because that's the way that originally ABC and all of the people, Howard Cosell and all of those guys, poured into the marketing of what would happen with Monday Night Football, to the point where now Thursday Night Football and Sunday Night Football are trying to compete with that brand of what Monday Night Football represents. To establish a brand usually takes years, a lot of money, a lot of concentration, and then you need outreach around all of this stuff to effectively get there. If you don't have a person working with you to execute all of this stuff in communication, then you're relying on what actually is the best form of marketing, which can be very confused, and that's the quote-unquote word of mouth. And word of mouth, usually, if it's best, is crafted by people like Charlene that have a lot of experience in this. So I gave that long diatribe to give people a little bit of game of information. So now as we bounce through these topics, they can kind of follow us and not have their ad hoc ideas of this, but also to say, you began with saying when some of your first clients said, we spend a lot of money and don't get results. Oftentimes, people don't even know what they're buying when they pay for communications. It's almost like this belief of direct correlation of, if I pay a PR person $500, then technically I assume then the very next day I should get $1,000 worth of business. This not how that
You
works.
just described what a lot of clients think, and I tell them up front, nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be happy if I get you nothing. I'm going to be very happy if I get you something and you'll be happy too. But don't go into it thinking because you've paid a little bit of money that you're going to be featured on NBC Nightly News or the Today Show next week.
Yeah.
You have to build to that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, a lot of clients, they don't even care about local. I need to be on CNN. I need to be on Roland Martin. You got to do your backyard first. That's my philosophy. If you've never been on TV, period, ever, no place, you haven't been on 2, 4, 7, 62, nothing, but you expect to be on the network is going to say, where has this company been? Send us some tapes of their previous appearances. You have no previous appearances. So you need to sit down, take 10 seats, and listen to me. Okay? I don't know everything, but I usually know a lot more than the client does that's never done that. They may have a good grip on their business. They may have the best bakery in town. You know, the best pound cake, the best cupcakes, the best cookies. Mm-hmm. But if nobody knows about it, all that stuff is going to go stale and you're going to have to bake fresh tomorrow and the next day because you didn't sell it all. And that's the difference between people who know marketing. Yes, word of mouth is great, but eyeballs and ears are better. And, I can tell 10 people, but with one commercial, you can get 10,000 people.
But this is also where the experience comes into play because it's arming the word of mouth person with the tool. Because it's like the game telephone. By the time I tell you, then you tell your friend, then your friend tells somebody else's friend. Detroit is different has become, okay, on the west side, it's like some microphones in this house. Because that's what it becomes as it continues to drop down. If I have tighter messaging, then now I've given you a tool that you can take to your friend. They can take to their friend, and then they can take to their friend. Hence, like I say, that grandiose but brilliant marketing mind of Mel Farr. It was a reason he had on a cape. It was a reason he was flying through the sky. It was a reason you had them as a mascot because he knew by that I'm capturing hearts and minds and attention, as you say, the eyeballs and the ears. Now I'm watching my Sunday cartoons, and I thought that was an effective strategy. It's like, okay, I'm watching my Saturday cartoons. Why is a car commercial playing during my Saturday cartoon? It was obviously smart enough to recognize in the market, okay, it's a lot of single mothers or mothers are going to make probably the purchasing decision, which most people know women make a lot of purchasing decisions in the household. The mom is going to be sitting down as I'm watching, Mighty Mouse or the Jackson 5 cartoon or whatever cartoon I'm watching. I'm looking at Mel Farr. This fits into the arc of me as a child. So this is, at one point in time, if you're really young, cartoons were primarily played on Saturday mornings for people like
Saturday
me.
morning cartoons.
And you would have a couple different commercials that would be bold enough to do things like this. And you can get that ad buy for a lower cost if you understand who the market of who you're reaching. He knew that he was reaching a market of moms like mine.
Mostly you had toy stores and Dairy Queen, stuff that kids wanted, toys and ice cream and candy.
And in that would be a Mel Farr commercial interspersed at time to time. And it's like, I don't even know who this is, but I want to meet that guy. Hence, if he becomes more of a hero to me as a kid, that's influencing my mom. As that influences my mom, that influences the purchase decision. As that influences the purchase decision, it's an effective marketing tool. But this is like designing a communication strategy. What has it been like in this process of like working with people over these years? Because you're also, you have a client, but you're also teaching your client about the field that you're in.
That's a tricky question. Most clients that I have, and I don't work with a whole bunch of people. I used to have, like 10 clients at a time, but they were all in the same, like the fashion, different kinds of stores and this and that. And I primarily work with businesses that are very sustainable. My biggest client right now is a funeral home, a Black-owned funeral home that is very progressive. This funeral home has an entire art gallery. Okay. We are putting together for next month a jazz and art show. It'll be the second annual. Kimmy Horn and the band will be, doing a whole jazz thing. There will be artists on premises with their work. Mrs. Kemp, this is the Kemp Funeral Home. They have an art. When you walk in, you think you're in the lobby of the Ritz Hotel or something. It does not feel or look like a funeral home. And so that gave me a lot to work with because people think funeral home, oh my God, you don't ever want to talk about one. You don't want to go into one unless you have to. And it's very different. So it was challenging for me, but because they're very progressive people and a lot of fun. They like jazz, they like art, they like good wine, and they're fun people, and I'm doing a lot of work for them. And also, I'm working with a young brother who's an insurance broker, who used to have his own State Farm agency, Brandon Bell Agency, but he can. And I recently left my insurance company that I've been with for years, because my rates shot up way high, and that company would not lower. And my agent was trying to get it lower, but he couldn't because he had to go by the rules. So I went with this guy, and he could shop around because he's a broker. He's licensed to sell anything. And he saved me about $300 a month, on my bundle with cars and house and all of that. And that's very important because you got to have home insurance, you got to have car insurance, you got to have all these things by law, and to protect your, what you own. So I'm working with him. And that just happened because I was looking for a product. And then he started asking me about what I do, and he became a client. So they both were, the Kemp Funeral Home and Brandon Mill Agency were both Anamata Senior Care, who you interviewed. You interviewed them. They were all sponsors of my show, my radio show, my previous radio show, which, don't have anymore because the station changed formats, and we won't even get into that crap. But I pivoted to podcast, and we just shot 4 of them. They were just edited like yesterday. So we have yet to upload them. That's what I was doing before I came here today. So I have to upload them to a YouTube channel, and I'm learning how to do all of that because that's not something I've ever done. Fortunately, I'm working with somebody who knows how to do that, and he's very good at it. And so it's fun. It's fun. And I have some other ideas that I'm going to implement after the first of the year. I want to get this down pat for these paying clients to make sure they're getting a product that they can utilize, that it's tangible, they can share it with whomever they want, they can put it on their websites, and I will also have it on my own channel. So it's kind of a cross promotion, them and myself.
I like it.
Yeah.
And let me say this in reference to podcasts is, Detroit is Different. Has been doing this for a minute, and I've learned
How
more
long have
over
you
the
been
time.
doing this? Because
Since let's see. So next year is the 10 years. So since 2014. Wow. And I think this is another key that comes into mind with your experience. So traditional advertising, if we're talking about reach and broadcast, it has reach, meaning that really you still need to be skilled to get an audience. But, if a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old get the morning time show for a station with enough push, they're going to end up with millions of listeners just because of the time of day and people just going through the dial. And a lot of that advertisement is, as they say, like what I call reach advertisement, meaning like you're trying to reach as many people as possible. The goal when it comes to podcasts, when it comes to YouTube stations, when it comes to this media, independent media, you're looking for rich connections. So the difference with a rich connection, the spiel I usually give each podcaster as they start Detroit is Different is this. I tell them, okay, if you come to Detroit is Different and your podcast is going to compete with whatever pop culture discussions people are talking about, if you're going to talk about what everybody else is talking about, if you're going to talk about Kanye West, Beyonce, and Kim Kardashian, what's going to happen is you're one voice in a pool of millions. So it's going to be tougher to make that reach connection. I know you're the most popular person I know you're the funniest person but now you're competing against that whole arc of everyone else in that world. The goal with this content, I think, is to make rich content. So some of the most successful people I know when it comes to YouTube and podcasting have very niche and specific based content creations. So shout out Tom Lawrence with Lawrence Technologies and a lot of the work he does. He just basically evaluates computer components and how they go into components. But it's so niche and specific, he's become a subject matter expert over maybe about 9 years he's been doing that. He has a cousin that just she reviews model trains, and it may be the most successful YouTube channel I've ever seen. And when I say successful, not just necessarily because of views, but because if you're in the model train industry, where do you go? Like, would a model train maker end up on the Today Show maybe once or twice? Yes. But are they continuing to make 52 episodes a year specifically about model trains? No. So the example I always give is this. I've never been on a yacht. I don't know anything about yachts other than I know you need to dock them. So I always say this example. If I made a podcast today called Tying Knots on Yachts, and I did it for 3 years straight, and I only have 100 listeners, I probably could sell a commercial for $25,000. And people look at me and say, why would you do that? And it's like, you got to think about it. Because who the hell would be listening to a podcast about tying knots on yachts other than somebody that owns a yacht, somebody that maintains and has access to yachts, or somebody that's thinking about a yacht? So that's how you got to look at this form of media. So don't think about reaching so many people because, yeah, if you talk about, I don't know what nowadays. If you talk about Jeezy breaking up with Jenny Ma, everybody's talking about that. And I don't know what world, unless you just happen to be in that world, that fits. So you have to be very niche and specific. You can't even
avoid it. It's every place you look, somebody's talking about that.
But that's where, like, if you had a podcast where you already were talking about divorce and how divorce functions, then now that's what I call when big content just lands right in your lap. And now you're seen as a subject matter expert to speak about it. But if you had a podcast about, I don't know, black sports, and now you just shift off and it's like, yeah, so enough about black sports. Let's talk about Jeezy and Jenny May. Now, you may have some of your audience stay with you, but you've just diluted it. Jenny Ma, Jenny May, Jenny ain't with Jeezy no more. You know what I'm saying?
Jeezy left.
Yeah, Jeezy left. So either way, you know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't have the richness. And I think that this form of media functions best when you're in that space of richness. And I definitely think just your broadcast experience, who your clients are, how you're going to approach the mic will add something different because people want something different in this space than what's overpopulating, as even broadcast is shifting and taking a lot of cues from podcasts now. But you have to be comfortable and know who your audience is, because that's the coolest thing about podcasts. Like, I'm taking my audience on a journey with me wherever it goes. And even as I speak of what I'm speaking and what I've learned more, if I were to redo this, I would completely come up with a way more niche. I probably would make a podcast called, and somebody probably may take this idea, Best Vacant Lots in the City of Detroit. If I were to make that podcast and then just have a video and just make 3-minute videos like, hey, this is a really good vacant lot, then now the urban ag movement connected to Detroit, all of this solar panel stuff starting to come and bubble up more and more connected to Detroit, a lot of land use people, a lot of community groups. Now I'm becoming a subject matter expert on how I evaluate vacant lots, whether I do or whether I don't. I've just exponentially put myself in the mix. I would come up with that podcast if I was starting from scratch right now.
Well, the difference, you asked me earlier, the difference between doing broadcast and doing a podcast. I haven't been doing podcasts a month and a half, so I can't really compare. What I have been accustomed to for all of my broadcast career, whether it's television for 18 and a half years or 6 years and 8 months in radio, is that there was always a variety. Yeah. So there wasn't like a niche. I've done a little bit of everything, and I love that because I was giving others an opportunity to expose their business without paying. They didn't pay me. I'm interviewing them. They're on TV or they're on the radio. And I'm also learning from them. And it was different every day. When I was on TV, I didn't know from day to day, like a factory worker. He knows what he's going to do when he gets to work. The cook knows what he's going to do when he gets to work. I never knew what I was going to do. I knew I was going to be going out covering some kind of story. I didn't know until I got in there. Once in a while, something big was happening, and they would say, this week, such and such a convention is coming to town. Charlene, you're going to do this. So-and-so, you're going to do this. Like when Jesse Jackson ran for president. And, he had a big following.
84 or 88?
The second time.
So 88. 88, I want to say he won.
The year that he won Michigan.
Yeah, 88.
Okay. Well, there were several candidates, and they picked several reporters from Channel 7. So-and-so, you go here, so-and-so. Charlene, you take Reverend Jackson. They gave me Reverend Jackson because he was supposed to lose. And I would be, at the bottom of the, the other big stories, and then they do me. Well, he won. Droop! Surprise! I was the lead that night because Jesse Jackson won Michigan. They weren't expecting that. I wasn't supposed to get the lead story.
I don't think America expected that.
Nobody expected that. But, there I was covering the Jesse Jackson story. I've had an opportunity to do a lot of wonderful things. I've seen a lot of tragedies. I've seen, homicides, and the person's still laying there in the middle of the street before the medical examiner shows up.
Wow.
Sometimes before the cops even show up. White boy Rick, who they named him that. Rick Wershey is his real name, of course. I was sent over to go interview his grandmother the day after he was arrested with Coleman Young's niece in the car with him or whatever. And so I'm over there ringing the bell, knocking on the door at his grandmother's house. She peeks out. I have the microphone. No comment. Okay. I go out into the street to do my little stand-up, and my cameraman, seeing what's happening in back of me, he says, Charlene, you got to move. There's a car coming, and I believe it's Rick Wershey. I said, no, he's locked up. No, we didn't know he was out. Okay, we didn't have cell phones. So we jumped back in the truck. We said, we think he's out. He got out of the car, and he said, I understand you were at my grandmother's house trying to, he said, cut the camera off. So the cameraman took the camera off. We never turn the camera off. You never turn your camera off. You just don't point. You keep the sound on. So you could, see the pavement, see his feet. You could hear him threatening and saying, and I know you're out there, Rick, right now, but maybe you don't even remember this. But it was kind of like, don't put this on TV. Please don't put it on TV. So we get the tape back to the station, and I said, we can't run this. Yeah. I mean, because, this is what happened and blah, blah, blah. And the cameraman usually gives the reporter the videotape, and you go into your editor and you edit. I wouldn't give it to him. I was afraid. And I took it home. And the news director called and said, bring it back. We're going to do the story. That tape does not belong to you. It belongs to the station. And we're going to air the story. And I was, oh, no. Well, I came back to the station. I brought the tape back. I could have been fired for that, actually. But it was a situation where I wanted them to understand that I felt very threatened. But we ran the story. Nothing happened. It was fine.
I do have this question in reference to that, as you've seen Metamorphosis, as we get to the end of this interview, per se. But we definitely want to bring you back and definitely heighten you up, because I do think your show was about something. I think it was about small businesses and community businesses. I mean, mind your business. Like, that's the scope of the niche that I feel your show was, and providing a platform for that, because your last show on the radio was myself, but also a reconnection to Deshaun Franklin and what he's been doing with the Indie Fashion Show for years. And I do think that it's been a niche in connecting with that. As we get kind of to the close of this, I have questions of what do you see next as far as like some of these messaging from what we're going to get from your show? What do you see next of like messaging people are connecting to? How do you see people responding to content, to media, to broadcast, to journalism these days?
Well, I think journalism has taken a detour from what it used to be. It's not, the people who are on TV, radio, covering news are not the same kind of, I don't want to say unqualified, because there are a lot of really good people. Really good new young reporters that I've met, that I've watched, that I continue to watch. I'm a news junkie, and but I see people that are hired on the basis of sometimes nepotism. There's a lot of that going on right now at two Detroit stations. I won't say who the people are, but that's okay. I mean, if you can bring your son in or your cousin in, and they know what they're doing, then that's fine. You shouldn't not be able to hire them. But there's a lot of fluff in the news. There's a lot of fluff. There's not a lot of deep digs as there used to be.
And
there's still some really good investigative reporting.
Yeah.
Most of those people are not on the air anymore. M.L. Eric, like him or hate him, he could dig deep. Charlie LaDuff could dig deep.
But
Maybe too deep.
now for both of them, it's interesting that you bring both of them up. And we recently, last year, Al Allen was here in Detroit is different. We were actually working on another project, and he was speaking to that same thing too, because the resources associated with doing some strong investigative reporting, it's faster than the news cycle currently is. Like your son even made reference to like frame of reference and how fast phones have things move, but like an investigative report may take a year, 2 years. Like you may really need to follow something for a longer time.
And you're getting a paycheck every week, and the station doesn't want to spend that kind of money paying one reporter to stay on one story, because sometimes they think maybe you're dragging your feet, and most things don't take a year. I mean, really. I did an investigation when I worked in D.C. of a black woman police officer who, and she called me, and she was making a complaint against one of her colleagues, who was a male police officer. And I guess they were joking around, and this is before the Me Too movement, but he wanted her to pose nude with just her police hat and her holster and her gun. Well, obviously that was that was awful. That was just awful. Did she have him on tape saying that? No, because she didn't know he was going to say it. So she didn't have a tape recorder going. Yeah. It was in passing. He said, "I'd like for you to blah, 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 blah." And she reported it, and they scrapped it. No. So she called me, and she didn't know me. And I told the news director, this is a story I think we need to dig deep into. And he said, yeah, let's do it. And then once we started getting all the interviews and the collaboration, they turned it over to a white guy who was much more experienced than me. But it was my story. She called me. She didn't call him. And they turned it all over to him. Well, it won an Emmy, and they wouldn't give it to either one of us. They kept it because they said, well, it was a collaborative effort. Well, it really wasn't. You snatched it from me, and you gave it to him. And but those are the kinds of things. And we dug, and people talked. You know, we had proof, and the guy, I think, eventually got suspended or fired.
Yeah, and the reason I said a year, just because some of the stuff happening right now, the amount of money, the amount of contracting, the amount of resources, the amount of just changeover.
Didn't take them a year to get Kwame.
Well,
they did that real quick.
Well, I think there were. I think the forces and nature of media, the polarizing, because that's the other part of sometimes when a story does catch, like the amount of money that the news stations and newspapers made off of the Mayor Kilpatrick story. That's the not spoken truth. I think it's like an elephant in the room of the resources. Like it paid off because the reality of race is still such a big thing here in Detroit, and what Mayor Kilpatrick represented, his agency. So I'm not speaking about the man and what he did, and because I know it's a lot of people. There's probably more black people that didn't like Mayor Kilpatrick and his tenure in office than maybe some of the white folks. But we definitely know there was a strong sentiment throughout the state of Michigan to basically not like what he represented, how he stood, what he stood for, just the agency and his moxie and everything. Like, I'll leave on this story. I finished at Walsh College, but I started at Henry Ford Community College. So during my time at Henry Ford Community College, one of the classes I was taking was it was one of my business classes. I want to say it may have been a public relations class. And I'm in the class, and this is right around the time when he's booked originally. And I'm just not really saying much because this may be like the second or first class. And white guy stood up. First thing, he was like, well, I'm going to tell you how he is because I'm actually the guard for him. And then another white guy stood up like, I'm one of the guards too. So I'm like, wow, this is interesting that they're traveling down here because I don't know if people know this, but a lot of officers come in and around the city of Detroit, or a lot of people that want to be police officers have like the criminal defense courses, and then they'll be a cop in Detroit for 2 years, and then they end up being like a captain in whatever little small Michigan town they from or whatever. And and he's talking about Mayor Kilpatrick, and I'm just observing this. I'm just sitting back, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I know so much of his history from the Shrine of Black Madonna, from the people I know, from his family, and he said nothing but just disparaging comments. Everyone white in this class is just like agreeing. Like, I always knew, I knew before when they first elected him. I don't know what was wrong with him in the first place. We knew he was a thief. We knew he was this. We knew he was that. Then I turned around, and I was like, but have you ever had a conversation with him? And he was like, nah, but I could just tell that he was even in jail, because basically he was alluding to him being in incarceration. He was trying to game the system there and take over, and I could feel he was nefarious, and we as guards have made a pact with one another to treat him a certain way, and he's not going to get over on us like he got over on the city of Detroit. And I was like, boy, oh boy, this is all from the media. This is all from the media putting out images and stories about who Mayor Kilpatrick is, to the point where now it's the person that's basically, supposed to be your guard, saying that they're going to go out their way to give you a harder time. And I was like, this is some wild stuff. And this is also the same messaging that permeates, where it's like this person clearly wants to be a police officer. So if this is what he sees in Mayor Kilpatrick, imagine what he's seeing in me. And I'm not even no elected official, especially if I'm driving down the street with a hoodie. You know what I'm saying? God forbid being in whatever Bay City or wherever Michigan he is the captain of right now. But,
But juxtapose that to what a lot of people are considering the savior of Detroit, who's had all kinds of charges, but nothing ever Teflon mayor.
Well, I think this is other story. Hence, like why I said I think it may take about a year
That would
to
take time.
sift through.
It also takes some chutzpah. You can't be afraid.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Nobody wants to be the first to touch that one.
Yeah, that's going to be a. I don't know what's going to happen. I believe that being here at Detroit is different. Definitely puts me with so many podcasters, and it's weird because some of the podcasters here are very much in support of the Duggan administration. Some people are not and challenge it.
A lot of those who had something negative to say, he's a very smart man. He hires them. They're now on his staff.
That's been one of those savvy. He's done a lot of savvy moves. I personally think one of the biggest things that exist when I think of Mayor Duggan. You see, Charlene gets me to talking now, but and it's not just Mayor Duggan. It's Dan Gilbert. It's Roger Penske. It's Mr. Carmanos. It's the Illich family. It's not even necessarily what they're doing and who they are specifically. It's the fact that they're taking advantage of doing what they're doing in a place that has a majority black population, when the black business people and black leaders do not get access to the same resources. And they also are being not given the same gateway. So like I remember, and I always liken this back to, it was a big back and forth, and I'm going to forget the direct quote, but when Don Barton, and people may feel one way or the other about Don Barton.
You were asking me about who I work with.
But when Don Barton was pushing to get a casino, and he even went out and got Michael Jackson at the height of being Michael Jackson, and Mayor Archer explicitly said my role is not to get a black man a casino, and I was like,
not to make black millionaires.
Not to make black millionaires
rich. It's not my job to make black people millionaires.
And
then he went down to Toledo and is part of Hollywood Casino in Toledo.
But to make that statement is just like the brash systemic racism, even coming from another black man, that would never have been spoken about Illich, because he would have never had the moxie or gall to say something like that. Like, my goal isn't to make a billionaire have more money, because the Comerica Park deal, I don't know if a lot of people remember all of the things that happened for Comerica Park to launch what now I guess is District Detroit. But it was a lot going on as being one of the first people. I was a Comerica Park employee, and just leading up to that, and a lot of the land acquisition. I don't know if people understand that at the time, Mayor Coleman Young was a part of what would have been a casino group in some of those spaces and places where what now sits Comerica Park. My godmother, rest in peace, Joanne Watson, with the YWCA and what was the YMCA. It's a lot of things that the Archer administration really did pave the way for Illich Holdings and the Illich family to propagate and expand what their fortune would be, even into Motor City Casino.
But Who are the wealthy black people in Detroit? Can you name them?
And that's where I have a challenge. That's where I have challenges to it, because like the things that Mr. Wash has gone through, the things that like
Glenn
a Herb,
Wash, and I did work with him.
the things that like a Herb Strather has gone through, the things that Don Barton has gone through, the things that a lot of Mr. Hardiman, like the access to resources for a lot of the black business people are not at the same level, and that needs to be challenged. Like, I have no problem, even with like a Matty Maroon, to think about the way that he slummed over properties for so long, to basically be rewarded with the fact of like the city and the state, the bridge, but also them facilitating the sale of a lot of his properties for that bridge, and also the Ford Center. Like, this is like, these aren't the ways that oftentimes black business owners in this district with some influence are treated. If anything, we're taxed at higher rates, we're permitted at higher rates, where things are slowed down, not to mention the media, not to mention the scrutiny. I'm gonna give you my granddad was so funny. So I'm gonna not use the word directly because you didn't, but I remember I'm in this is back when CVS is Arbor Drugs. And we're in Arbor Drugs one day, and I'm picking up this Black Enterprise because Russell Simmons was on the cover again. Or Puffy. I think it was like Puffy and Russell Simmons. And I was getting in. I was like, this is black business. And my granddad looked at me, and he looked down. And he was like, no, don't ever do that, because any N-word that ends up on that ends up with IRS debt. And I was like, my granddad always talking all this racism stuff, man. He's crazy. Because I'm young. Then I meet LaVan Hawkins. Then I meet Mel Farr. Then I meet Mr. Graves, not meet Mr. Graves, but know of Mr. Graves and all the stuff he dealt with Black Enterprise. Like, I'm starting to correlate, like, damn, I guess, yeah, if black people end up on the $1 billion list, that kind of almost puts you on the IRS list as well. My granddad may have had some truth to this mirror.
Your granddad was a smart man. Because it's happened to the best of them. It's happened to the best of them. A good friend of mine who was my attorney, Elbert Hatchett, one of the most brilliant attorneys that I've ever met, was making a lot of money in criminal defense. Yeah. Back when all the drug dealers, you had him on retainer and this and that and the other. And he was featured in Ebony magazine. They showed a place he had up north he had a boxing place where boxers could come and train. He had a horse farm. They did some interiors of his home. He had the indoor swimming pool, indoor tennis court, because his son was trying to be a professional tennis player. Soon as that magazine came out, it wasn't just a few weeks. IRS, knock, knock. So doorbell camera, we're here. Yeah. And they indicted him on something with taxes. He said, and he told me, he says, they don't want the money from me. They want me. Shame. Yeah. And he went to federal prison for a year, I think, or 18 months or something like that. Because if he'd never done that magazine thing, so we have to that's why you don't know. I think there are some wealthy black folks that don't flaunt what they have. But white folks, the more they have, the more we admire.
Could you imagine a black Elon Musk or something like that? Guy would be like.
He would be. The public admires. The more a white man has, he can go to the moon. He can send people to Mars.
A black Elon Musk. Yeah, he's selling tickets to Mars, and they don't got the ship, and they haven't sent nobody there. Could you imagine a black person selling a $25 million ticket to someplace and you don't have anything? I mean, the black media alone would be on top of it.
He'd be in a straitjacket. They would think he was nuts. So we're held to a different standard. Yeah, we're not afforded the same opportunities. I mean, we could go on for days and days, but we got to wrap this thing up because I know that I've been cheated out of positions that I should have had, that white women who were, didn't have one iota of what I bring would get the position. And then I would watch them crash and burn. Yeah. And then they'd say, oh, Charlene, We were
Can you
going to give
patch
you that
this
job.
up?
Yeah.
Can you patch this up and come behind and do the cleanup work? I mean, so that's the analysis. It's not as personal because I think sometimes I give these analysis and people think it's personal. It's not. Hence the term systemic racism. Like it's systematically set up for us to be in certain situations and function in these atrophied ways, which is more of a sign of our brilliance and our creativity, but it also is a sign of like recognizing the disparaging situations and conditions that we're functioning through all of this at the same time competing against a person that doesn't have to deal with none of this. And if they had to deal with just a little bit of this, as y'all saw that with the pandemic, because that's the classic example, like I say, you could possibly die and you ain't got no money. I was like, well, my neighborhood, that's like Tuesday. America dealt with that for like 2 days and people was like storming the Capitol and all types of stuff. You know what I'm saying? It's like, this is the Black experience of a testament. Like I say, it's our brilliance, but it's also disparaging that it's like we're consistently in this survival mode of like working at this clip where we feel like I got to do everything better than them. I got to do everything better at that higher standard and still deal with the reality of knowing that I'm going to be in the worst position. I'm not going to have anything given my way. I know that it's going to be things cheating against me. I know it's people conspiring against me. I know I got haters. I know I got all of this stuff against me, but bring it on. And you one of the people that done brought it on many a times.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, I try very hard. And, you know, I've been at this a long time. And, you know, I don't see myself stopping what I'm doing, slowing down a bit because I've done it for so long. And, you know, when you reach a certain age, which I have reached, you don't want to work as much. You want to be able to enjoy life and do some other things. And I'm going to do some other things. I'm in the process of, you know, re-engaging with my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha, because I have been out of the loop for so long. And I didn't want to have to go to one more meeting, you know, because I was on a couple of boards and now I'm not on those boards. And it gives me a chance to engage with my sisterhood, you know, and went to a meeting last week and it just really felt good. But yeah, I'll probably never stop doing, you know, PR, this kind of thing. Might slow down a little bit, but, you know, I have other things that I want to do. I want to travel. I traveled a lot during my younger years. And then it really slowed down because you get into the work mode and the parenting mode. But then I want to do some of that again. And I want to spend some quality time with my son and my grandson.
That's what's up.
While I'm not, you know, on a walker.
Yeah, I feel
You
that.
know, I want to climb Dunn's River Falls one more time.
Okay.
You know, without somebody holding me up or put me in a harness.
Okay.
I want to do those things. So, and just want to enjoy life and, you know, not so much meet new people, but engage more often with the people that I already know.
Cool.
Spend more time with people I already know and enjoy that. The simple things.
Well, you always know you got a place here with Detroit is Different. You got the Commissioner Gordon Lamb because you can hit me up anytime. So we're going to work with it. And I'm going to put information to get people to watch her podcast. Check it out. Different flow with the guests. You guys got a lot more to backstory with round 2. Thank you so much, Charlene. This was fun.
Lots of fun, and thank you.
All right. Peace.
Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.